One of the most terrifying things about our universe is the idea that it is 14 billion years old, home to billions and billions of planets, and that, as best as we can tell, every single one of them is dead. One of our favorite topics on this show is the Fermi Paradox, the big question of where all the aliens are, and to discuss those hypothetical alien civilizations. By default, I work from the assumption that those clever aliens simply have yet to come into existence, that life itself may or may not be rare in this galaxy, but if it is not, then it's probably relatively simple creatures, or even a whole galaxy of lichen-covered rocks and oceanic algae. The alternative is that intelligent aliens either never get past where we are now with their space technology, or blow themselves to smithereens, and in some way that allows no continuity of intelligence, such as if we got murdered off by AI which then went on to colonize the galaxy in our stead. While the amount of heavier elements and their proportion in protoplanetary disks has grown with time, we believe rocky planets could have been forming at least as far back as 10 billion years ago, meaning we should have seen alien life arising since then. If we assume we are a fairly mediocre example of evolutionary timelines, and that perhaps 1 in 1,000 star systems holds a planet on which complex life could arise, and that such life tends to move toward intelligence given time, then we should have seen something like 10 million spacefaring civilizations arise in our galaxy alone by now, and with at least 1 million of them arriving on the galactic stage before our sun first rose above our planet's horizon. Such dawned civilizations would seem to be all gone by now. Maybe they transcended to another reality or went off to colonize the multiverse, but if they did exist and leave, others should surely be arising constantly to replace them, about one a century if not more. So either our numbers, just 1 in 1,000 systems hosting complex life, are way too high, or those civilizations don't last long enough to get into space or to keep transmitting. But another option would be that those first civilizations arose not long before our planet formed and colonized the whole galaxy before anyone else could object. Normally this means one group gets the galaxy because we assume it takes them less than 1 million years to settle the whole place, and that civilizations arise even less commonly. But if we were talking 1 per century arising, then nobody gains that huge initial edge, and even if it were just one every few millennia, that would probably prevent any one species being able to just roll over the whole galaxy and do whatever it wants to the millions of primitive planets it encounters along the way. Indeed, even if it is just one species, given how interstellar travel timelines and living on alien planets is likely to cause divergence, they may find themselves surrounded on every side by their cousins, who just happen to share a home world with them, but are otherwise even more alien than the typical green-skinned or pointy-eared alien from television sci-fi. So what if they got in a fight, those distant cousins or aliens from different homeworlds, say 4.5 billion years ago or earlier, and we lucked out to be forced back on the scene? Or didn't really, and they zapped our planet shortly after it formed, and that's how we got our moon. It's a little more viable because it's the exact same odds that prevailed to be first on the scene in that primordial time, or if the universe is just less friendly to life emerging, but explains why currently existing life might have emerged so late. This is still problematic because it would require us to be lottery winners, but in reality, virtually every Fermi Paradox solution also requires that, and someone does win the lottery. The issue here is that we still have to wonder what happened in other galaxies that kept someone from there coming to claim our galaxy after that apocalyptic war. Which raises an even more disturbing possibility, that such wars inevitably break out everywhere, and that they are inevitably ruinous to all players and leave the galaxy in a protracted or even a permanent state of wreckage, with ghostly armadas wandering the stars, both the ruined husks of ancient fleets and the still active automated annihilators prowling for signs of the enemy, which in their ancient eyes is everything not them. Either life is sufficiently common to let conflicts of such levels happen between alien species regularly, Or just as likely that after expanding for a bit, those divergent factions of any civilization end up in a war with each other. Colony versus homeworld or colony versus colony. That latter tends to work even in smaller dwarf galaxies or globular clusters where it might be improbable you get life forms arising separately. This solution fundamentally is entirely indifferent to Drake's equation, the big guideline for how probable alien life is to arise, because if it is rare enough nobody near us exists, the solution might still be true. Whether they are 1 in a billion galaxies or a billion a galaxy, if planets able to bring forth intelligent life tend to rapidly spawn galactic wars of annihilation, their frequency is pretty secondary. All that matters is that's the equivalent to the frequency of the species arising. In some ways, it's even darker than the two primary Fermi Paradox late filters, that space travel is impractical or that civilizations blow themselves up, because it means space travel is practical and civilizations only avoid blowing themselves up until they get to such a degree of technology and energy access that they wreck the whole galaxy in the process. Problem is, darker or not, it's actually got a better line of reasoning. Nukes are expensive, ICBMs more so, and they both represent the basic energy and propulsion capability to get into space. Individual folks can't make either, and so the setup is that large organizations alone can do it, and it is the inherent nature of large organizations that they are at least halfway functional and interested in continuing to function. Hence why they don't instantly collapse. And before you go thinking of that group you loathe that's made of crazy, irrational idiots, do keep in mind that if they've been around a while and gotten large, they probably are a lot less stupid and self-destructive than you think. Much as you probably are compared to what they think of you. So it isn't really the ability to hypothetically create civilization-destroying weapons that's the threat. It's the ability to do it so easily and cheaply that random lone lunatics or small crazy cults can. This sort of applies to AI too, as the really dangerous kind that can rapidly take over and start mass-producing more of itself, and weapons to kill us, is the same sort of technology that lets you rapidly colonize space, and just in general, you're probably going to have folks use it for those industrial and space settlement ends with some success before it breaks loose and kills everyone. And it really has no motivation to chase you to the end of the universe. As we discussed in other episodes, if our current understanding of the universe is right, that it is expanding and that the speed of light is not something you can circumvent, then no individual or unified group can expect to achieve universal domination, or eternal and meaningful expansion. You are always going to end up running into something else eventually, and the further out you are when you run into that wall, the more stretched out your effective supply lines are, while your enemies all around you have every reason to mercilessly attack you since they've often never met each other, but they saw what you did to those civilizations you previously encountered. Mercy may or may not be common in alien civilizations, but it's not likely to be abundant in how they handle galaxy-consuming genocidal neighbors. So acting as one is not likely to be a wise course of action and can be predictably unbeneficial to those considering it. You will be outnumbered by civilizations all around you, half of whom statistically will be older than you, at least in that area of space. Which might seem rather optimistic for an episode coming out on Halloween with an obvious scary overtone. Our reasoning goes that this doesn't give any reason for an AI or another group to chase their rebels off to the edge of the universe, and means any civilization that's already modestly interstellar is relatively immune from extermination by any single source originating from inside them or on their border. So all is well, at least for the concept of civilization as a whole surviving. Individual planets can get snuffed out easily enough, and certainly the people on them. If some lone loony or vicious empire or AI gets loose in an interstellar empire a few dozen light years across, it may be catastrophic, but everyone in a neighboring system hears about it before any warships or extermination fleets can arrive, and everybody further off gets even more forewarning. If things are going badly in those neighboring systems, they may send help, but they may also send a few survival fleets with orders to get far away, then pick a random direction to change course to. There's no stealth in space, and an enemy chasing you has a big advantage in being able to see your drive signature and not needing to waste fuel slowing down that you need to use to settle a sanctuary. They can just burn that fuel to catch you faster and ram you. Nonetheless, once you've got a couple of light years of head start, tracking and catching you gets rather dubious. You also can't trust any forces you send out to track your enemy down over tens or even hundreds of thousands of years. For one thing, they can be attacked by leaving weapons or even garbage in front of them, left in the wake of the ship they are pursuing. You also have to worry about them giving up, turning their coats, or even mutating mind, body, or belief to something you dislike, far away from your control. And given the implied mindset of the folks doing the chasing is one of great distrust and paranoia, figure they would also be paranoid about that. And again, this is all well and good, and one of our reasons why we tend to assume that even with all the dangers of technology, galaxies still get settled. There's no galactic civilization, just civilizations all over the galaxy, some friendlier than others. Problem is, this all relies on the idea of the menace emerging from a point-like source, which would be true even if some Cabal tried to lay low and get cells on every planet in that civilization before striking. And those timelines, made worse by continuing outward colonization, do not favor success on their part. Light lag is not good for coordination and cohesion of purpose, and cells of conspirators get no exemption from that. Quite to the contrary, probably. But it's not point-like if every time civilization pops up somewhere, they turn into a local disaster. And if they are frequent and persistent enough that when you're fleeing whatever obliterated your own civilization, you just run into the murderous remnants of some other one. In some ways this gets worse, because if you get out on the galactic scene and start seeing signs the universe is a wasteland of fallen empires and murder machines, you have to start deploying border fleets to make sure those murder machines don't wander your way. As we discussed in Interdiction Hypothesis and Chronos Scenarios earlier this year, a civilization might find it can only really maintain itself at a certain physical size, and not want to deal with large borders light centuries across, or rebel colonies in rival neighboring kingdoms. So instead of colonizing everything, they send out harvester ships to strip mine a bubble of space around them, bring that home for use, and leave those systems sufficiently barren that nobody could get a strong foothold there, and certainly not faster than they could respond with overwhelming force. It's like dragging all the good soil and minerals back into a central area to make it a dense paradise, while leaving the area around you a wasteland. Folks could still live there, probably tons, but never enough to be a real threat to you. I've taken to calling these IBCs, Interdiction Bubble Civilizations, and the thing about them is that they are not classically visible by our normal SETI and Dysonian SETI line of reasoning, as they are not terribly large in real space. They don't meet our normal qualifications for loud aliens. Loud aliens represent the default problem of the Fermi Paradox and the Great Silence, as they are what we expect to see if space colonization is practical. Loud aliens are distinguished by possessing all of these three characteristics. They expand into a galaxy fast, they last a long time, and they make visible changes to the areas they reach. They may or may not expand beyond their own galaxy or skip primitive or undesirable planets. They may or may not be biological anymore, or be some AI successor that wiped their precursors out. They may be unified in goal and direction, or entirely divergent and unconnected to branches of their original civilization back on their homeworld. But the key characteristic that distinguishes them from other types of civilizations is they essentially leave a very detectable presence by being big, visible, and long-lasting. Here though, whether they last long or not, or expand fast, they never expand that far. And while their home system or settled core is blatantly visible, possibly much larger than even a conventional Dyson swarm, we could easily miss a Dyson swarm or even whole Birch planet even a few hundred light years from us now. There is nothing subtle or hidden about one. You just don't see the lone campfire a few dozen miles away. We were looking for the forest fire that spreads over everything, Dyson swarms everything. Here they're just strip mining everything, and even if they went to the point of disassembling whole planets in that IBC's fringe areas, we probably would not notice unless it was close to us. Nor would we be likely to see them starlifting every sun near them because they probably would not allow it. star lifting apparatus is incredibly useful, but letting someone set that operation up far from your center of control is very likely to end bad for you, or be seen as likely to by folks who don't want well-armed and resourced rival neighbors. Your typical star has more metal and heavy elements lying around on it than every rocky planet inside a few dozen light years combined, if not further. And the infrastructure for star lifting parallels that needed for Nyckel-Dyson beams, which is where you convert a star into a megalaser for zapping planets hundreds of light years away like a long-range Death Star. They could convert it into one very quickly, so it's like leaving a loaded cannon nearby to let starlifting go on anywhere you couldn't see it and get a fleet to it before they could finish building it, which is probably not much more than a light decade. You probably know what the build time and functional range of them is too, and might make your bubble that wide for protection's sake, or just litter its outreaches with dumb violent machines. Now here's where I stopped with this idea in the spring, but I've been pondering it since those episodes came out, and I'm writing this in July, so that wasn't too long ago, and it has a problem. It's all well and good to say the galaxy might have hundreds of these IBCs in it, entirely aware of each other's existence and just not too chatty, and that we just haven't gotten quite good enough to spot any yet because none are too close to us. When they do message, it's too weak for us to hear or too directional for us to be in the way of. It might be very bad for us if they were closer, but once a civilization gets out into space and starts having interplanetary colonies and a few interstellar missions maybe, and sees what a hassle and a threat those colonies can be, and starts spotting these other IBCs, they either learn the lesson by observation or the hard way, or a mix of both, and turn into an IBC themselves. Galaxies slowly fill with new IBCs that are either from new species or the occasional successful breakaway that fled 1,000 light years and set up their own new civilization, and millennia later decide not to repeat the mistake themselves and become an IBC. And these might be single solar systems surrounded by ravaged systems a dozen light years around, or a dozen light year wide empire surrounded by light centuries of desolation. It just depends on how big you feel you can grow. Indeed, it could even be that growing to Dyson swarm size was considered impractical. Smart fleets and armadas represent an existential threat, as they are far from home and can develop opinions. But a key thing about artificial intelligence is that it rarely needs to be very smart. It is easy to imagine our galaxy being littered with half-intelligent war machines that over millions of years have mutated and evolved into something else. But I imagine this would be less common than self-replicating war machines with very stringent anti-mutation controls. And yet, if a million versions of those got deployed in the typical galaxy, frequently in hundreds of different versions by just a single IBC, then we could easily have some mutant-heavy version prowling space like the Reapers from Mass Effect. Except if they did become highly intelligent and followed a quasi-Darwinian track, they probably would just settle down into being another IBC themselves. But you had to be decently smart to see or care about the perils that cause an IBC. Rather, I think the worry is that the galaxy, and other galaxies too, might be plagued by whole ecosystems of dangerous but dumb machines. Because strip mining neighboring solar systems is just one option for minimizing potential troublesome neighbors. You don't just leave those systems barren wastelands. You leave it full of coyotes and landmines. Neither is a threat to you, and a galaxy full of them isn't really indicative of a desire to wipe out other civilizations. Indeed, a fairly obvious safety mechanism is to only ever give them drive systems able to land or leave relatively low mass and airless rocks. They are not just going to magically evolve a vastly different and higher powered drive system, though they might cannibalize it off of someone else, I suppose. Keep in mind, something as smart as a dog can see a jet engine all day long, be impressed by it, and never figure out how to make one themselves. Given that the default drive system would tend to be an ion drive, solar sail, mag sail, or some equivalent to a solar moth, none of which are likely to be buildable to let you travel to and fro from real planets, it might be a natural convergent design that explains why planets like Earth get left alone. Those machines hang out on moons, asteroids, and comets, feeding off of them, and representing a serious hassle for any civilization trying to set up shop there. You can do it, but have to send real colonial fleets, not some small ship or von Neumann probe. This helps with one of the usual problems with Berserker probes left over from old wars in the galaxy. you have to explain how Earth keeps getting missed, and saying that it only just got possible to see us because we only recently got radio is assuming aliens willing to devote vast efforts to exterminating other civilizations are also utterly incompetent. They could spot this planet's biosignature for the last few billion years as easily as our radio signals. There's no real reason why you would wait until you got radio traffic to come thump someone into the ground. That's just a handy plot device for stories that need to explain why we might encounter aliens now instead of 10,000 or 10 million years ago. If they specifically like to leave planets alone until and unless they become a threat, then they might leave us be till we're spacefaring, but still send monitors. Just because they stick to a small bubble of space does not mean they cannot detect distant biosignature-heavy planets and send simple flyby probes every few thousand years to take some scans and send that back. Moreover, they wouldn't have much reason to worry about us given that the apparent state of the galaxy does not seem to favor sprawling and expansive civilizations. If civilizations arise here often, then there is a reason none went full Kardashev 3, and nobody has licked that problem in a few billion years of trying, so why worry humans or some other new kid on the block is going to? On the flip side, if you would like to leave other planets alone but cut down on other galactic scale or IBC civilizations, then leaving a bunch of predatory spacefaring animal-level intelligences infesting everywhere in the galaxy is a pretty safe bet. Since you decidedly do not want these things ripping up resources at a fast pace on million-year timelines, they would be relatively minimalistic, not prone to building to Kardashev 2 status in a system, and thus very easy to miss. Like a big anthill built into an asteroid, you only see it if you get near. There's a lot of ways you could tweak design or programming to keep them low in numbers and not prone to chewing whole systems up if you wanted. Why haven't any of our spaceships encountered them? Well, why would they? Imagine some species of insect-level intelligent asteroid dwellers. Why would they have high-powered radar looking for one random space probe Voyager's size? They don't have the built-in thrust to go intercept it, and why would they consider 1 ton of random metal to be a smorgasbord since they are living on an asteroid full of billions of tons of metal? You don't build things to attack every random spacecraft. They are basically an engineered space life form designed to make settling systems a dangerous pain in the neck and slow any efforts so that anyone trying to get a foothold near your territory has such a rough time of it that you don't need to worry about them becoming a threat. They are trying to build up in a desert occupied by scorpions and coyotes, and if they start succeeding a bit, you have plenty of time and warning to wander by with your own armadas and give them hell. And you can legitimately say the coyotes and scorpions aren't your doing, because even if your species actually made those, rather than inherited them from prior civilizations, it's probably been a very long time and a lot of changes. So it'd be like a settler in the Sahara Desert complaining to Cairo about a bunch of ancient traps left over from a dozen different ancient Egyptian dynasties, not to mention several leftovers from old kingdoms in the Sudan or Libya or the Congo. Not our problem, and if you want to make something of it, we'll be glad to send a few battalions of shock troops over to discuss the matter. On the whole, at least from a practical perspective, there's not a lot of reason to avoid this strategy if you determine settling beyond a certain distance is impractical. You settle as far as you can maintain control, send automated collectors out as far as you feel is economical, and maybe even a bit further, just to despoil boundary regions, and then leave the area full of dangerous subhuman intelligences and booby traps. This is a strategy your neighbors who evolved on a different homeworld a decent ways off actually have no reason to complain about, since the wasteland you generated on their border is now doing the job they would otherwise have to spend resources doing themselves. You hardly care if the murderbots can prowl out to other star systems on their own, but I'm not sure you would add that feature into them, and the difference in non-intelligent critters designed to survive in the void, spreading over a solar system, and spreading out to other solar systems, is akin to a species here on Earth traversing between islands, and magically getting the ability to migrate to other planets too. It's not really likely to occur unless you have to intentionally build it. Whereas you could send a spaceship to each system to dump off local replicators and destroy its interstellar drive automatically. Without that, Creatures with some sort of ion proportion or similar aren't going to be able to easily detect and vector in on some conveniently passing interstellar asteroid, and unless they are configured to make their own fission reactor, aren't likely to be able to survive that journey. So this is a pretty good strategy, and if short on ethics, it honestly isn't that monstrous as these things go. You didn't send armadas to obliterate a proverbial island full of people, you infested the waters nearby with sharks. Or didn't go clean them out yourself after some neighbor or ancestor or some random lunatic from your own civilization left them out there. So a decent strategy to pursue. At least it would be if you could be confident that it wouldn't mutate a lot, which you can be if no intelligence is tinkering with them and the original designers were smart. Self-replicating machines are not hard to build so as to be less likely than not to ever mutate and breed a single time in the whole timeline of our universe, let alone bounce thousands of steps towards sapience and intelligence. But that applies if you choose to build them that way. You would know how to if you could build them at all, but that doesn't mean every person who ever built one felt like installing those sorts of protocols. Some people just want to watch the galaxy burn. And if they didn't build those protocols in, you get a galaxy infested with lots of self-replicating mining machines and weapon platforms that are also now on a Darwinian track. They do mutate, they do evolve, and they do rapidly begin to favor self-preservation, growth, and species survival. This doesn't necessarily imply a lot of brains either. We tend to assume spacefaring means smart, but so long as your machine diagram equivalent of DNA includes a power supply, fuel source, and the ability to eat space rock, you wouldn't even need the brains of your typical honeybee. There's no special advantage to intelligence for maneuvering around your solar system so long as you got some navigational concept for moving on Hohmann transfer orbits, which would have been built into you by any original designer who wanted you mobile. Navigating space is non-intuitive to us, but actually a lot easier than navigating Earth, or even a small forest on it. Our solar system could be infested with such beehives too. Every so often they drain out whatever rock they're living on or get too big for it, and split and swarm out to a new one. I don't think it likely, but we could easily miss those even if thousands of asteroids in our belt were home to those hives. We are just very new to this stuff. Then we go plant an asteroid mine somewhere ourselves, and get back some very surprised and possibly short and terrified message traffic back. Then it's time to send in the Space Marines, and your solar expansion follows a very different pathway. This is all assuming no one did fight some galaxy-spanning war, or several million system-wide engagements over billions of years, that there are no tons of wrecked armadas rolling around the galaxy, and some not-so-wrecked ones that actually do go hunting radio signals. Now that last one isn't necessarily a good approach anyway, since any civilization using radio for communication is going to rapidly start compressing it, even where they don't encrypt it. The point of compression is to remove repeating bits of data and replace it with the equivalent of an IOU note. Conceptually, you replace a video made of 10,000 frames of pictures by having notes saying that pixel 7 to the right and 5 down is going to be the color red for frames 1012 to 2056. This means that generally speaking, the patterns in the signal are getting removed and replaced with those IOUs, and is going to look increasingly static and noise-like, so your hunter-killer fleets are not really looking around for coherent messages because their enemies always encrypted and compressed everything to look like gibberish, and probably sent it by tight beam rather than omnidirectional signal. There's a lot of easier to spot and harder to hide telltale signs of civilization anyway, techno-signatures, and we give off tons, so again, we have the issue that if someone wanted us dead, or left the galaxy full of dangerous and murderous toys a few 100 million years ago, we don't have a good reason why they haven't succeeded. Which they presumably have not, unless maybe they already did and they were just a touch less evil and sent in nanobots to newly emergent planets to murder everyone in their sleep and upload their minds to digital equivalents of nature preserves. Earth got wrecked a century back and we're all living in the Matrix, sans actual bodies, on the hard drive of some ship in some obliteration fleet roaming the galaxy. Since I could absolutely imagine us doing that to someone else and bragging about our own benevolence while we were at it, I don't think we want to rule out aliens doing that, especially ones that might be post-biological themselves, so didn't think of it as murdering us so much as giving us a gift. However, those ghost armadas could be prowling around the galaxy, and every other galaxy too, and the reason why is that they were all built by different civilizations or different factions and eras of the same civilization. They might be very prone to attacking each other whenever they get a whiff of a rival fleet, so they never get that dense and spend a lot of time repairing and hibernating, because their whole job is to rush out and attack any signs of an emerging Kardashev 2 civilization. They do not care about planets, they care about large collections of solar collectors and arrays of megastructures sufficient to measurably alter a star's emissions, and when they see that, they go attack, and if they see any big ship or collection of ships, they go attack. Then they go lick their wounds and rebuild, because they were very much not designed to be a rival empire, but rather the destroyer of them or avenger of them, as a lot might be leftover middle fingers from civilizations that started growing to K2 status and got visitors. Now, this is where the notion diverges from the typical Fermi paradox solution, because it is actually falsifiable. Were this scenario the case, then when fights go down, there would be a lot of debris floating around the galaxy, and while a lot of it would end up gravitationally bound to solar systems, or falling into stars or planets, and a lot would end up on an escape velocity trajectory out of the galaxy, there should also be a lot floating around space. It might look passingly natural to casual glance, especially if they've been collecting micrometeor damage and ices in the interstellar void, but there should be a lot of it, and even on galactic timelines, a lot of these Ghost Fleet remnants ought to be visibly floating around. That doesn't mean we could detect them yet, any more than our hypothetical space bee infested asteroids, but they ought to be everywhere. And they ought to be the sort of thing that would pop up for nearly every civilization and in every galaxy, so the whole universe is just covered in half-trashed empires, ghost armadas, floating wrecks, and graveyard planets and space habitats where some fragment of civilization might be hanging out and just keeping its head down. Mind you, that fragment might be millions, billions, or even trillions of people just in one solar system. This is about why we don't see Kardashev 2 civilizations everywhere, Dyson swarms or other collections using most of a star's power, since they are basically the only aliens loud enough we could notice unless they were trying to be heard or are right next door. That's a very dangerous galaxy and a fairly bleak picture, so appropriate for a Halloween episode. It is less bleak than some though. See our Gods and Monsters episode if you want a darker and more Lovecraftian take on the universe. In this one, at least you have a chance for survival. You just have to go fight for it in the techno-organic equivalent of a dangerous forest or desert wasteland, as if the natural universe and space weren't already dangerous and hostile enough. Ultimately, do I think this is the actual state of the universe, or wider sum of reality? Probably not. I think our normal reasoning that life is just very rare to occur or get technological still remains our best bet. Still, the universe is a big place, and it can hide a lot of civilizations, and all the easier if they're silent as tombs. Imagining a civilization that existed billions of years ago and still has any resemblance to itself requires figuring out a way they could keep on mission for the better part of eternity. At the same time, it is hard to imagine anything they'd be more focused on researching, even defeating entropy, than defeating this sort of entropy of purpose. Creating AI or modifying people to be better at handling these vast timelines may be the main approach. So, in this month's Nebula exclusive, Caretaker AI and Genus Loci, we explore the concept of both AI wardens and even posthumans put in guardian roles over everything from a small facility or habitat to entire planets or interstellar communications or defenses. That's out now on Nebula, the largest creator-owned streaming service, where we release a bonus episode every month, along with all our regular content a few days early and ad-free. Other bonus content and Nebula originals from an ever-growing pool of creators. Using my code, IsaacArthur, you can get 40% off and join for about $3 a month, about the price of the drink or snack you've been enjoying during the episode. We also now have lifetime membership and gift cards available to let you share Nebula with friends and family. When you sign up at my link, go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur, and use my code IsaacArthur, You not only get access to all the great stuff Nebula offers, like Caretaker AI and Genus Loci, you also be directly supporting the show. That's it for October, but join us this Sunday, November 3rd, to look at terraforming new planets and what the early terraforming period might be like for settlers. Today we looked at ancient weapons of war able to shatter galaxies, and in a week we'll look at how you might find the resources to build such juggernauts as we look at how to harvest planets. Then on November 10th, we'll have an update on fusion power, how it works, and what progress we've made in recent years. If you'd like to get alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You can also help support the show by becoming a member here on YouTube or Patreon, or check out other ways to help at isaacarthur.net. Until next time, this is Isaac Arthur, wishing you a great, safe, and spooky Halloween.